Good morning. It is June 24th, and this is a Project Blue devlog update. This week has been very fun, very exciting for me. The things of note that have been added. There's now a way to programmatically adjust how long an animation takes. So, actually, I guess, okay, I have to look at my notes to remember what even was in the last video. There's now like a working hit reaction. I think in the week before I had actually made the animation, but it was not really hooked up or working in any sense. It was just kind of existed as an animation, and there was like some piece that I put in place to actually, set up that collision. But now, if I hit the T button to spawn a enemy hitbox on top of my character, you can actually see that it reacts. And so, with this, are there a bunch of smaller sub-features of that. First is the fact that I can, if I go into the data table, I can adjust the hit stop duration for this. So currently I have it set to 0, which is just to say that when the collision occurs, the animation just comes out smoothly. If I, let's say, set this to 0.25, something noticeable but not totally unrealistic, you can actually see there's like a freeze now on the first frame. This is really nice because it kind of sells that element of impact. It's like I think it's a common tool used in probably most fighting games. I know not everyone does. Soul Calibur doesn't have hit stop, I'm pretty sure, but basically it means that when there's a collision now, there's like that extra quarter second now to really see the collision, and it makes it a little bit easier to parse mentally. It also kind of works as you could say balance tool, or like an element of balance, in that larger hit stops mean easier to recognize and thus easier to confirm into combos. So having that being just a thing that's adjustable is really nice. And I didn't really talk about it, but you can kind of see it here. I got Deep Hook Attack. That's the name of we'll call it the move that's being played on top of my character. There's no animation or anything. It's literally just that square spawning and then being despawned half a second later. So very cool that I have that lever. And the other thing is that I have a system in place where the hit reaction itself has its duration adjusted, or its play speed really. So I have it set to 55 here, which is approximately its net neutral animation speed. Actually, I think if I do 0, let's just see. I think if I do 0 and then I do it, I think this is minus a hit stop. This is the animation playing at its natural play rate. But let's say I have a variety of attacks, and they might have they might trigger the same hit reaction. Let's say the standing hit reaction is for a medium move that doesn't have any special hit qualities to it. It doesn't launch the enemy, and it doesn't crumple them. I still might want the hit reaction to scale in some sense, because that is how the move that's connecting might how do I say it? Moves have frame data on them, such as on hit and on block, and they typically, within at least the fighting game community, are listed as at advantaged or disadvantaged by X number of frames. Basically what that's talking about is that if a move is advantaged on hit, it's saying the hitter, the character initiating the move, has that many more frames to then begin acting again once they come out of recovery and the enemy comes out of the stagger animation that they're locked into. Being able to now adjust the actual hit stun is very useful, because it means that I can still reuse animations. I don't need a unique animation with its own sense of timing per move based on how long I want them to stagger for. This means I can sell really big moves, but not have I not have to give them a bunch of excessive recovery then to align it with whatever frame advantage or disadvantage I wanted to have. So for this for this debug attack, let's give it like an immense amount, you know. It was like 55-ish, and that was pretty close to what, like, if you do 0, it's just the pace. It like, there's a little like branch for handling this use case. Let's say it's like 120, so it's 2 seconds of stun plus the hit stop. You can see now it's almost like I'm in water. Like that's like a pretty extreme end. I can't think of a a game where you would have something like a 2-second hit reaction, and the hit reaction is something as like relatively low key as this animation. Like at this point you're looking, this is like 2 seconds of stagger is like a cripple state. You wouldn't use it like this, but you can see how it affects it, you know. Or inversely, I might do let's do it like faster. Let's do 25, so it's a little under half a second. You can see it sounds like a little more whippy. It's kind of weird because there's so much hit stop relative to the amount of like the animation being played now, or like how fast it's being played. So it's a little like unintuitive in that sense. I think maybe more realistically you'd probably reduce the hit stop to sell this better. Like very minor amount. Yeah, now you like you can barely even see the hit stop now, but you can sort of feel it still, right? You can see that little jerk that's happening, like, yeah. I don't remember if I had it last time, but now like there are actual hitboxes being drawn to the enemy. It was just a case of like me trying to cast like a player controller to the other character, but there was not a second controller, which then just fizzled out the rest of the code for the setup. You might see it actually when I hit start in the debug in the top left here. It'll have now like just an error message, but then it still runs the rest of the code. Yeah, the cast player controller to BP Manny C1. This is C1. This is C0. But anyway, actually I'm gonna go here and go run it this way so I get the wider screen, a wider view. Now there's actual, you know, collision working between the two of them as well. So if I do this, you can see, yeah, like whips them back, and it's kind of an extreme amount of hit stop. I've got a whole second of hit stop. I think the number I've rested on for this jab that felt kind of right was 0.08 seconds. And the stun frames, I don't really remember how I came to that number. I might have just spitballed that. Let's look at it now with that hit stop. Oops. Yeah, that's like way too little stun frames. That's like, they recover much faster than the person jabbing. Let's say, you know, 20. This would be better done if I actually like looked at the animation sequence that's being played for the jab and like counted how many frames it then took for them to recover, and then, you know, did it that way. I think typical fighting games, you would have like the jab. If you landed a jab, you would be advantaged. So the idea is like you're checking them, and then you still get to like take your turn. Although you're not necessarily gonna combo off of it, but yeah. And you can see, although it'll be better if I turned it back up to a high value, that the hit stop is applied to both characters. Let's just go a little absurd for a jab. Whatever, you can still see him. You can see both of us are pausing. This is important because if only the recovering player was stopped, then it's like the frame advantage shifts extra hard based on the hit stop. And the hit stop is really not supposed to like affect frame data. It is like, it is there to sell it. It's just like a feel good thing. Having issues early on with like getting the collision to work. Initially I made the hitbox, the actual collision cube, like smaller than the visual, like the mesh that was being drawn. So that led to a weird issue where I would get the hit reaction, but only if I was like kind of deep into them. Like this is where I would have to be standing to get the reaction, even though you can see the hitbox is pretty deep into their hurt box. This for instance would not connect. So I'm just calling that out since I can't really demonstrate the working through that. That's like covers the like we'll say the actual like content. But this week was a lot of refactoring. Basically, when doing the hit stomp stuff, I ran into a conundrum where it wasn't even really for implementing the hit stop. It was for like actually having a player character interact with another player character. When I was testing it with this thing, this hitbox that just kind of spawned on me, everything looked like it was working fine. The problem was that I'm doing collision using the actor event, or using the custom event that's like pre-made for all actors, which is begin overlap. And my old approach was to basically spawn all of the hitboxes immediately, but activate them in a sequence where like they would appear and they should be active on the frames designated. The issue with that though is that means that the overlap began for every frame instantaneously. So like when I would do this punch, what would happen is the second I hit the punch button before my character has started or even finished the startup animation, the other player would be hit reacting. And it's like without doing some sort of like event tick thing where I'm now checking every frame if the hitboxes that are interacting with each other are activated. I couldn't like work around that, so I did a rewrite kind of how the hitboxes are drawn. I'll actually pull up a graph because I think it was like really nice. Let me see. Turn on the whole display, and here I mapped this out for my own sanity because yeah, it was a little bit hard to visualize what I was going to be working towards. Yeah, so yeah, this refactor had like two like major goals really, or like the necessity with what I just said, which is that like the way I was doing using actor begin overlap was not congruent with how I had designed the hitboxes. But I was also running into sort of just a conundrum of like my BP Manny, my player character's like blueprint was getting kind of like chock full of things, so it was a little hard to like start tracking down functions. Now I'm not gonna like come back here and act like it's the cleanest thing ever, but it's a little more organized now. If you look at these bottom three functions are just helper functions for the sake of spawning that one hitbox. And I just marked them with all caps debug at the front just to kind of remind myself, hey, this is like not a real function, and I'll probably delete it at the end of the project. There's a couple of setup things. These are just like for like, getting the necessary like references that the player character is going to want to know about like while playing. And then really that just leaves these four like methods in the middle that are actually doing things. Flip character is kind of a stub function still. This is I think I pointed out early on, but like if I walk past this arbitrary point, I spin around kind of like a fighting game, but it's not locked to the other player character like it should be. That'll have to be fleshed out. And then return to idle state is just kind of like a cleaner function that runs at the end of most other state changes, just so it's like a reset because there's state priorities being set as I do stuff, and you want to clear that so the character can like start doing other things again. And yeah, just a couple of functions then to actually apply the state and hitboxes. And so a lot of this logic that I had before with BP Manny like running its montage and spawning its hitboxes now lives in this new BP. Let me pull up that graph again. Actually, let me just talk about it from this standpoint. That was the whole point of this. Basically, just to give a rundown of how I did this diagramming. White represents like actual blueprints, actual objects that'll exist. The black with like green text is sort of like the code being executed. It's sort of like logic that runs. And then yellow is sort of like the circumstantial element of the game. So like something happens, or like the pieces align in such a way that it is relevant to the code. So in this case, like the player hits move, or if a collision is detected, it's that kind of thing. So anyway, before it was Manny existed. Let's say the player input for move. That's a bit funny, but I mean like doing a move like a punch or a kick or anything, not like moving around. The way it then worked was Manny was responsible for, looking up the move, given the name, which was like tied to the input, finding the animation, spawning the hit groups, which hit groups, just to remind you, is like where the properties such as the stun and the hit stop live, but also like damage, and yeah, the object is actually used for like nullifying the hitbox as well once one of them connect. So that's what these were doing. And then the actual hitboxes themselves are spawned. And so as I was talking about before, like hitboxes always, like when you started a move, all the hitboxes spawned immediately. And then the hitbox itself was responsible for becoming active. So like they all had a timer, and that would tick down, and when it was like, when it hit all the way, or when it hit like its active frame, it would then become active, and when it's inactive frame, it would be disabled, or it'd be destroyed, I think. But yeah, so that was like the old method. Doesn't work with a begin overlap because active or inactive isn't something that overlap cares about. So this is like what prompted me to do the refactor. But anyway, the collision is detected. It checks the hit group for nullification. As I mentioned, this is me like kind of referencing, or this is me denoting a reference. The hitbox is pulling on its reference to its relevant hit group to check this value. And then based on that, it either, if it was already nullified, then it's like the collision never happened. Or if it's not nullified, then we trigger a hit reaction, which is handled at Manny. Although I should be clarified, this is not very, like both of these have this issue. This is not the same Manny. This is like the other Manny now is triggering a hit reaction because presumably you did a kick or whatever, and the collision happened and it wasn't nullified. So now the other Manny would be triggering a hit reaction. That's what this is trying to say. So, but yeah. Basically, the old pattern didn't allow me to use begin overlap, and it had Manny doing a lot of stuff in addition to already being the player character with like its movement and its animation blueprint, and interpreting the inputs themselves. So this was, I felt like Manny was getting kind of bloated, and coming at it from the sort of web dev traditional pattern of like MVC, I was coming to the realization that Manny is the view. It feels weird to say that because Manny is the character, and I guess in that sense it feels right for it to encapsulate a lot of logic, especially in a fighting game where like the only things that matter are two characters basically. But that didn't seem appropriate given how much complexity I was like kind of already like. This is the stripped down Manny, right? I'm not doing anything with the animations anymore, basically. I'm passing a reference to Manny to my other object, which I'll get to in a second, to run the animation from. But Manny doesn't really actually do anything with that. Manny's just looking for inputs and kind of passing it along right now. So, for the new paradigm, I denoted the newer stuff with green. This is not like an all-inclusive list. And I mentioned like these are like references, but there's actually a lot more references kind of being passed around than just this. I just felt like this was the relevant one because it's being directly referenced by this decision node or whatever this is called. But anyway, the new central piece to how the logic is being handled for moves is the move orchestrator. And I'm gonna say right now, I hate the name. I hate a lot of my variable names. I'm like still trying to figure out what to call stuff. But it's just very awkward because like concepts are so nebulous. Like a hit group, I called it a group because it groups things based on whether or not they should be nullified, but then it's also holding like the hit properties. It's like really weird. So I'll probably be revising these as I go. But anyway, the move orchestrator is basically now doing a lot of that. Basically the three things here, like you can see them here as well. And it's just a way to like kind of encapsulate all that logic. It's now like Manny's kind of just looking for inputs and stuff and like doing hit reactions. But as soon as it like recognizes that there's a hit reaction, it calls on the orchestrator to like, hey, I need to stagger, or I need to punch. That's like the only animations I have that orchestrator really works with. But you get the point. Like, if the character is reacting or inputting a thing other than just movement, which is being done on the animation blueprint, the move orchestrator gets called in. So And even when you're doing the move, like just walking around, I should say. Let's say, yeah, even when you're just walking around, something that's the animations are being handled by the animation blueprint. The move orchestrator is still responsible for like drawing the hitboxes that kind of then go with that animation. So even then, the move orchestrator is doing its work. So anyway, the first two nodes really don't change, or the first two like logic pieces that were called out here are pretty much the same. It spawns all the relevant hit groups and it calls the animation. Although, like I said, now it's got to pass a reference from like Manny into the orchestrator, just because the orchestrator itself is not what's being animated. Another big piece of that changed is that there is now a concept of a hitbox timer. The timer is just a model to track when the hitbox itself should spawn. And so, I don't know if I talked about it in a previous video, but this was almost a pattern, like a similar idea for a pattern that I came across early on that I wanted to do for my hitboxes. If you go back to like here, like why did I make the hitbox all spawn at once and then on a timer become active? Why didn't I just make them spawn on a timer? The reason I didn't do that is because the way timers are set up, it's like it's like a sort of just a unique combination of the timer, the function call, and the object that is calling it. So before, I didn't have a hitbox timer level in this here. It was just Manny summoning the hitboxes. And so I was trying to use Manny to like do a timer, but basically what I was doing is I was just resetting that timer. And so I'd only ever draw one hitbox for real, only spawn one hitbox. And I was like, okay, so I need to pull the timer into a bunch of instances of their own. And so in my mind, I was like, I'll just do it into the hitbox itself. That makes sense, right? Because they're one hitbox, one timer. It's like they map out well. Issue though is that like the hitbox has to obviously be spawned to then run its timer. So that led me into this thing where I tried this boolean is active, and it just kind of it sidelined, not sidelined. It kind of caused me to diverge from the right track because now I can't use begin overlap. Oh, give me a second. Take a sip of tea, jeez. I get really worked up because I'm so excited. So this is what led me to the idea of what if I just had an object now that exists pretty much solely for the sake of running a timer, spawning the hitbox, and then when the secondary timer of like when it becomes inactive hits, if there is one. You know, some hitboxes last the whole time, like when you're in an idle animation. The hitboxes don't ever despawn from a timer. Then we destroy it. We destroy the hitbox and we destroy the timer. And that's what I'm here. And so like these two new objects, the move orchestrator and the hitbox timer, are like so big in my mind. It's not big in the sense that like they do a ton. I mean, the move orchestrator does a lot, probably the bulk of the code at this point actually. Like the plurality, we'll say. But like what I gained from this was so much in the way of understanding how to think about Unreal objects. They're called actors, right? Like if I create blueprint class and it's like asking me what type of thing I want. An actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. And so obviously my first thought is like that's like characters, I guess. It says object, but the word actor makes me think it's like some sort of like sentient thing. That not like literally code sentient, but you know what I mean, it represents a sentient thing. Then it says like character down here, or pawn that can be possessed and input. Okay, so I'm like that's a minigame thing, and this is like specifically for something that walks. It must have mobility built in. But in my mind, actor meant something that is a creature, kind of. Or at least an object, right? Like it says an object. But even that is like too concrete of a way to think about it. An actor is just like a vessel for like code. It's like I'm spawning I'm spawning a instance of an object in like traditional coding. Like it's just a thing and it just does stuff. It doesn't have to exist in the world. Like I think it technically has to locate like exist somewhere. Like I'm pretty sure I'm spawning these move orchestrators into like the coordinate 0, 0. They technically exist in the world, but they don't have a mesh. They don't interact with anything physically. They're just encapsulated pieces of code. So I think I think this rework did so much for me in this way of like recalibrating how to think about these actors. Because now I've got an actor that is just like digesting like what's called a move, which is just like the data struct that has like a bunch of like values, like the hitboxes and the hit groups. That's like what this is just taking in, which I called it I called it move orchestrator, and then I renamed this to states because I think that's more accurate, since like the idle animation doesn't even have a montage attached. That's being handled by the animation blueprint. So yeah, like I said, the names are terrible right now. But anyway, yeah, the move orchestrator is just like, it's just executing a struct into like what it needs to be. And the hitbox timer is just a timer. A timer and a method to like destroy hitboxes. Where are we at? So let's see. Event graph, you know, okay, begin play. So the timer's made, and it's right away the active frame and the inactive frame over here. Those are just being passed in on the like the spawn of the object, and all they're doing is like boom. Is there an active frame not 0? Okay, then we're gonna use the timer. Oh, it is 0, then spawn the object immediately. Same with inactive frame. Well, not exactly. Inactive frame is 0. Okay, that means we're never despawning it. Oh, it's greater than 0. Then we set a timer. Boom. We set handles, and these handles are red to do the hit stop stuff. We have to pause the handles so that everything is delayed, but that's all they do. There's a couple of helper functions as far as like where to spawn the hitbox. And then there's this one at the end that destroys it. It destroys both the hitbox object as well as itself, just to clean up. And that's it. It's like, it's such a tiny piece now. Also, in hitboxes got got reduced as well. Before it had like the logic for like when they get activated or deactivated. Now it's like, let's see. So at begin play, the very first thing we do is we just look at the visibility, not the visibility. Well, the visibility, I guess, yeah, right. But the point with being is like we're trying to figure out what color to draw the hitbox. And so like if it's not set to visible, which right now I'm just leaving visible on because I want to see it while I'm coding, but you know, in the real game it's like you would only want that in training mode or something. So I went ahead and made a boolean. You know, if that's the case, it's 0 opacity, it's invisible. If it is visible though, then it's like, okay, well, is it green or red? That's basically what we're doing. Well, this is not. This is a little misleading. I changed the opacity based on if it's green or red because I wanted the hit boxes, not the hurt boxes, to be a little bit denser because it was getting hard to see. It was kind of hard to see the red overlapped with the green when they were like the same opacity, just because there's like so many green in this like cluster right here. But wait, where's the logic for the? I think it's in the construction script. This is where the color gets configured. There it is. And it's using the same thing. This should probably be... This feels like this should be living in the same space as the stuff for figuring out the opacity. I have to maybe review this to see why I did it like this. But anyway, so it's basically just some configuration for how the visibility of the hitbox, and then it's this one piece of functionality, which is checking for like hit collisions. Boom. You know, we validate, you know, if it's a good collision, you know, is it between a hitbox and a hurt box? Is it been nullified already? Does it even have a hit group? Because if it's like a collision, well, I think that's like I might want like an error handling message actually if this ever happens. I think that means something went wrong. But anyway, yeah, and if so, we go back here, nullify the hit group, then we handle hit. Handle hit is then being passed to being passed to the, wait, is this right? Group, get owner. Oh yeah, other actor. Yeah, okay, so it's being passed to the other Manny, basically, yeah. Yeah. And so then we go here, we break the hit group down. This is like where the hit group becomes relevant, although I'm not, you know, I'm only using stun frames currently and the hit stop duration. But, you know, new features to come. I kind of just spat some out because I knew, I just was trying to like think about what would go into that object. And yeah. Very fun, very cool. I'm so glad that I had like a legitimate excuse to kind of refactor. Like this necessitated the refactor, being able to use the timer so I can do overlaps, but it working then in my favor to also like take a chance to like refactor and have this orchestrator object. So nice, just so nice. That doesn't happen enough in the real world. But yeah. I think next it's time to start looking into canceling animations, and maybe, I don't know, there's a couple things I want to do, right? So just to like jump into the game, I would like to have like canceling, because in most fighting games, jabs actually cancel into jabs. They typically act as like a actual just a combo. Like you, in theory, I could do boom, boom, boom. I'm getting so much hit stop that I can't even like sell it, but like boom, 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 you know, and those would all connect. So being able to cancel would be cool. The thing that makes that like not OP if you're not familiar with fighting games though, because you could think like, couldn't you just kill a guy endlessly if you could do this? You know, there's also a pushback on every move, usually, I think. Pushback on 99% of moves. And so like that'd be another feature feature that I'd want to, where it's like if I'm hitting an enemy, then there should be a little bit of a gap that's kind of like spreading between us, and that makes it so like even if I could in theory like do this infinitely, eventually I'll back up and I'll hit them, and I'll back up and I'll hit them, not like manually but like sliding backwards, and eventually I'll be out of range, and now it's like, okay, we gotta start like fighting with our medium range buttons, or one of us has to move up again, or you know. So like, yeah, pushback and cancels are probably the two things I'll be working towards next, because I think that's like, those are pretty fundamental pieces of like how combos work and how like spacing works and pressure works. Another element I'll be looking at, but it probably will not come before those, is like inputs and input buffering. Currently it's like very just, you know, very basic. I'm just walking around and I've got one button attack. But, you know, in fighting games there's often a thing where you can, you know, do a quarter circle forward, or a half circle, or a charge motion and forward. Like usually there are some like less what, I don't know what to call them, more complex inputs that define fighting games. Although it's been less of a thing as of late, admittedly. But anyway, I'd like to like, you know, work on that and see if I can get something that reads those, interprets those. You know, using what I learned from this most recent like refactor, that'll almost definitely be its own class that is like attached to Manny. Call it like the input interpreter or something, and yeah. So look forward to that. As always, thank you for watching. This is always fun for me. I like getting my thoughts out. But if anyone does watch this, hype, thank you. And have a good rest of your week.